Before pills, before creams, before laboratories, we had something better, not a miracle, not a secret religion of herbs, just ordinary things that grew close to the kitchen door and were used so quietly that no one thought to call them health. We called them food. We called them tea. We called them what our hands already knew. And the strangest part is this. Modern medicine became louder and faster, but those old choices still held their place in my life, softly, steadily, like a good chair that never breaks. I am 98 years old, and people ask me why I don't live on a shelf of bottles. They look at my hands, the skin thin like paper but still working. They watch me stand up without making a show of it. They hear me say I slept well, and they tilt their heads as if that is unusual. I don't tell them I'm special. I tell them I'm consistent. I've lived long enough to watch medicine change its clothes 100 times. Names change, packaging changes, the tone changes, but the body stays stubborn. It still wants warmth, regularity, bitterness now and then, and a life that isn't always being forced to hurry. When I was small, we didn't have supplements, we didn't have detox, we didn't have anyone selling youth in a jar. In my village, there were elders who couldn't read, but they could look at your face and know if your stomach was out of rhythm. They could smell a fever on you. They could tell if your joints were swelling from the weather or from what you'd been eating. We were not romantic about it. Nobody said this is ancient wisdom. We were too busy living. Plants were not remedies. They were what we ate when the day was long, what we drank when the night was cold, what we reached for when something felt slightly off, and we wanted it to settle before it turned into something bigger. That is what I mean when I say I eat plants instead of medicine, not because I hate doctors. I've had my share, I've listened, I've taken what I needed when I truly needed it. But for the small daily troubles, the slow wearing down that comes with years, I learned early that the body responds best when you don't shout at it. You start with the plants that keep you regular. You keep your blood moving. You keep inflammation from becoming a permanent tenant. And you do it so gently that nothing has to fail suddenly. The first thing I kept, even when the world changed, was the bitter leaf. Not a specific leaf I must name like a product, just bitterness in the diet. In my home, it often came as greens that made a child complain. Bitter, earthy, honest. The elders trusted bitter greens because they watched what happened after meals. They saw that people who ate only soft, sweet foods became sluggish and swollen. They saw bellies harden. They saw skin break out. They saw sleep go thin. So we ate bitter greens the way you sweep the floor, not once a month, not as punishment, just as maintenance. Much later, I heard modern people talk about blood sugar spikes and metabolic health, and I smiled because they were describing with new words the same old observation. When you eat only what pleases the tongue, the body complains later in its own language. The bitter greens were a way of keeping the body's complaints quiet. Now people replace that bitterness with pills for digestion, pills for energy, pills for balance, quick fixes, convenient. But the old bitterness did something slower. It reminded the body how to handle a meal. The second plant I never let disappear from my table was the humble root that warms. In winter, when fingers stiffened and the air made every joint feel older than it was, we used warming roots in food and drink. Not as medicine, not as a ceremony, just as part of soup, part of tea, part of the daily pot. Elders trusted warming roots because they lived in bodies without central heating. They knew that cold doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it makes you tight. It makes your digestion slow, it makes your sleep lighter, it makes the knees complain. So they warmed from the inside. They didn't wait for pain to become dramatic. They didn't try to numb it. They tried to keep the body's inner weather calm. Modern science later began talking about circulation, about inflammatory pathways, about compounds in certain roots that can support the body's own quiet repair. That is the kind of thing I'm comfortable saying. Support, not cure, not guarantee, just support. And what replaced it? Little tablets sold for joint comfort, powders advertised with loud promises, and pain relievers taken so often that some people forget what their body feels like without them. I never wanted to live numb. I wanted to live capable. Then there was the plant we used for the belly, soft, fragrant, the kind you can smell before you see. After meals, especially heavy ones, elders would reach for certain seeds or leaves that calmed gas, eased cramps, and kept the stomach from turning into a hard knot overnight. We didn't call it gut health. We called it having a peaceful night. I learned early that digestion decides the day after. If my belly was calm, my temper was calmer. My sleep was deeper. My joints were less angry in the morning. My skin looked less tired. Everything is connected, not in a mystical way, in a plumbing way, in a practical way. Later in life, I watched people replace those simple plants with antacids, with chewing tablets after every meal, with sweetened digestive drinks in plastic bottles. Again, convenience, speed. The modern world loves speed. But the old way wasn't dramatic. It was almost boring. You ate, you cleaned up, you drank something simple, and you let the body finish its work. The next plant I kept close was not a leaf or root, but a skin, something that people now throw away without thinking. In my youth, we wasted very little. When we used plants, we used them whole. Skins, peels, stems. Many of them went into pot, into broth, into simmered teas. Some of those throwaway parts were where the strength lived, the bitter oils, the fragrance, the little compounds that plants protect themselves with. Elders trusted these parts because they didn't have the luxury of pretending the world was endless. They learned value through necessity. And over time, modern researchers started noticing that peels and outer layers often contain concentrated antioxidants and protective substances. I don't chase the word antioxidant. I just know what I saw. People who ate closer to the whole plant seemed to age without crumbling. Now the modern replacement is processed convenience, peeled, polished, softened, stripped down, and then after stripping the food, they sell you back the missing parts in capsules. I always found that backward. And yes, there were plants we used for the skin, not to stop aging, but to keep it from cracking and inflaming. When a person works with their hands for decades, you learn quickly that skin is an organ, not decoration. We used plant oils when we could get them. We used simple infusions. We used cooling compresses from leaves when the sun or wind had been too much. Elders trusted plant-based skincare because they watched it work slowly. A rash didn't always need a strong chemical smell. Dryness didn't always need perfume. Often it needed time, fat, and something gentle that didn't start a war on the surface. Later, modern science began speaking about barrier function, essential fatty acids, and anti-inflammatory plant compounds that can soothe irritation. Again, soothing, supporting, that is enough. Modern products replaced these with stronger soaps, stronger fragrances, stronger actives used too often. People scrubbed themselves like dishes and then wondered why their skin acted offended. I learned not to fight the body. The plants I relied on were not exotic. They were ordinary, and that was their strength. You could use them daily without drama. That is the part people miss. They think a remedy must be rare to be real. But the old remedies lasted because they were close, they were repeatable, they were woven into meals. If something only works when you remember to do it once in a while, it doesn't become a life. It becomes a hobby, and my health was never a hobby. Now, I will tell you what these habits did for me, but I will tell it the way an old person should, as observation, not as a promise. My skin did not stay young. It became thin, it wrinkled, it softened in places and hardened in others. But it did not become chronically inflamed. It did not itch constantly. It did not split and bleed from dryness the way I saw in some friends who lived on sugary foods and harsh soaps. My joints, they changed too. My knees are not the knees of a 40-year-old. I don't pretend, but I also didn't wake up one day and find my body had betrayed me overnight. Nothing failed suddenly. My body wore down slowly. I aged without collapsing, and that slow wearing down matters. It gives you time to adapt. It gives you time to adjust how you move, how you rest, how you eat. Sudden decline steals your confidence. Slow decline teaches you patience. My digestion stayed dependable, not perfect. I've had seasons of stress like everyone, but I didn't live with constant burning in my chest, constant bloating, constant emergencies. I learned to eat in a way that didn't bully my stomach, and I used plants to keep the rhythm steady. My energy was never the sharp, caffeinated kind. It was the kind that carries you through chores without a crash, the kind that doesn't need a reward for existing. And that, I think, is where modern life confuses people. They chase the feeling of being up. They don't realize the body prefers being stable. I have watched the industry grow around us like a city. There is a product for every discomfort. There is a pill for what you ate, a drink for what you didn't sleep, a powder for what you didn't walk off. Much of it is not evil. Some of it is helpful. I am not here to make villains, but I will say this. Convenience has a cost. Plants ask for patience. They ask for preparation. They ask for regular use. You don't swallow them and demand a result in an hour. You eat them and let them become part of you over weeks and months and years. Modern medicine is very good at emergencies. It can pull people back from the edge. I respect that with my whole heart. I have seen it save lives. But the daily shaping of health, the quiet prevention of small troubles becoming big ones, often belonged in my life to food and plants and simple routines. Not because I distrusted medicine, because I trusted my body to do its work when I didn't interfere too much. If you ask me what the real secret is, I won't give you a list of magical leaves. I will tell you something less exciting. Aging is not a disease, it is a process, and processes do not like being rushed. Speed destroys the body in small ways at first. Fast food, fast fixes, fast stimulation, fast stress, fast scrolling. The body is not built for constant speed. The heart can learn it, yes. The nerves can adapt, yes. But adaptation is not the same as thriving. The old remedies worked because they worked slowly. They didn't force, they nudged, they supported. They gave the body a chance to stay in conversation with itself. And I think that is why I am still here, not as a young person trapped in an old body, but as an old person who can still live inside my days. I didn't try to stay young. I just didn't interfere with my body. When I eat bitter greens, I'm not taking a stance against modern life. I'm keeping my meals honest. When I use warming roots and calming seeds, I'm not rejecting doctors. I'm reminding my body that it can settle itself. When I choose whole plants more often than processed ones, I'm not chasing purity. I'm choosing what I recognize. At 98, I don't have time for fads. I have time only for what has proven itself quietly. So if you hear my story and you want to do something with it, do it gently. Not as a challenge, not as a performance. Just begin placing a few plants back where they used to be, on the table, in the pot, in the daily rhythm, so your body can stop being surprised all the time. That is all I did. And I did it for long enough that my body had time to answer. Podcast clip plus B roll overlay.